Hi, we're Auction Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions. I think you guys are the first, certainly the first pair of guests we've had in the Shoot Room together, and also returning guests. So
we've got all the first
exclusive.
And been to the Shoot Room. Ours was in Bristol.
It was, yeah. So it's your first time here.
Well, likewise, because we were in London, and you had a very expensive painting on the wall, and every time I went near it, you like step away from the painting. I was saying,
thank you for the use of the office, Adam. It's very, very lovely office. It's also really exciting because it feels like we're in the Galactico stage of the natural capital economy. So a few companies, including you guys, are bringing together amazing people that we're leading in different ways to make super teams. So the Galacticos is one of my sports references. There'll be many of those. Real Madrid just rocked around the world buying the best player each year from other teams to put that team together. And that's pretty much what you're doing, Ben.
that's the aim.
That's a good segue into, can you tell people who you both are and what you do?
I'm Benedict MacDonald, founding director of Restore, author of Rebooting, and a lifelong naturalist. And we are seeking to scale nature restoration across the UK, not through an acquisition model, but through a model of start-to-end nature restoration. And now, of course, finding the natural capital needed to scale, secure, and ultimately deliver those projects.
I'm Gil Martin. I am the Commercial and Natural Capital Director for Restore. I too, lifelong naturalist, absolute nature-first focused individual, and I find myself in the odd position of marrying that set of values with a commercial ambition and intent so that I can unlock the commercial opportunities that facilitate the sort of ecological vision that Ben and Restore will be able to deliver. Not to be the vision themselves, but to make that vision happen. And that takes a little bit of creativity, a little bit of flexibility, and quite a lot of entrepreneurial spirit to create a kind of diverse, dynamic range of natural capital opportunities that the market actually wants, rather than just people like us enjoy talking about and describing.
We do. And you come with a hell of a track record of doing that, which we've seen firsthand. Can you tell people a little bit about where you were before Restore and some of the things you've done in the sector?
Yeah, immediately before Restore, I was at the Belmont Estate, and together we did some wonderful things, transitioned landscapes, built natural capital routes to market, built brand to carry that natural capital to market, and all of that great work continued.
Literally host the launch event for BNG.
We did, yeah. We hosted DEFRA's launch event for BNG. It's just a place where activity, action happens. There's intent, there's activity, there's action, and we took things to market and made things happen.
But with a class and a quality as well. So the presentation of the place, you really blended a premium offering to people, in very close proximity to Bristol, with a genuine commitment to the natural world, which is really hard to do. But I think you did that beautifully there.
Well, thank you. I'm proud to have been a part of it. And like I say, it continues. Everything that I've done throughout my career really has been an attempt to deliver restoration, explore opportunities for restoration. So highly ambitious, highly visible in an attempt to lead or to ultimately demonstrate a different way of doing things. And that's been true no matter at any of the places that I've worked over my career. The reason I'm really excited about joining Restore is because really I was trying to demonstrate a different way of doing things, to attend to something which really mattered to me, which was to find a way to inspire and catalyze change at scale and at pace, and so to demonstrate it's quite a powerful way of doing that. I'm excited by Restore because actually Restore's model and Restore's structure, that whole end-to-end nature restoration process without the need for ownership, which is one way to do things, but this way has the potential, almost unique potential, for tremendously rapid transition at scale, at pace. So really, really exciting.
Yeah, and I can't buy everything. It's not possible, as much as I might like to try. We need you guys to be helping other landowners. And we get asked every week, can you help us do this? We're not well placed to do that, but we've got some friends who really are. So Ben, can you take us from how Restore became an idea and when it occurred to you, you might have a chance of bringing this man in, because I know there was a huge amount of founders in the sector that would have loved the opportunity to grab Gil. So heck of a signing for you. So how did it come about, and how did Gil become part of your business?
Well, Gil and I met in a field at Ben Goldsmiths, as many of the best rapports in
That often happens, right? Yeah, shout out to Ben. Hello.
We were both looking at this kind of quite, low quality field that Ben's yet to sort of fully be wild, and we just sort of looked at each other and agreed it needed pigs, and that was how this unusual partnership begun. But from there on, obviously,
you are aware that's going to be cropped as a shot by Penny, and it just started with pigs.
It started with pigs, like many of the best things in life. So, I've always watched Belmont with an amazing sort of admiration for the financial pragmatism underpinning the vision without the vision ever getting diluted. Natural capital is a gift, but it's amazing how often the carbon tail ends up wagging the restoration dog. And yeah, I've no interest in that. I'm a nature first guy at the end of the day, and the speed at which Belmont has actually changed that landscape engendered a lot of respect at my end. And at the same time, rather humblingly, Gil was watching us and watching the speed at which we were turning landscapes without owning them, and actually without, at that stage, having any fully formed natural capital products. And I think we both realised that we would, potentially one day make a very good working team. Restore's journey begun with a £500,000 equity raise, most of that from clients who knew that we were on the cusp of delivering, and knew that we could deliver the fundamental thing, which is the ecology and the transformation. But, the first year of Restore was a consultancy, and I always said to my board and directors, I am not running a consultancy for more than 2 years. The consultancy is because we had to start somewhere. We couldn't start with acquisition. We didn't start with natural capital. We started with books and knowledge and vision and sort of lifelong nature experience. But we knew that to scale, we needed someone of Gil's kind of remarkable talents to come and join us. A classic example of that would be the Isle of Tarrant. The Kelleher family and I go back 5 years. A trust-based relationship lies at the heart of everything we do at Restore. A great ecological vision for transforming this, Castaways Island, 4,000 uninhabited acres, to this amazing emerald rainforest. And that's a lovely idea. It's a lovely vision. They know that Restore's got the ecological credibility to pull that off. But the natural capital deal to underpin that is not lightly designed. Many people can design deals, very few people can sell them. And at the end of the day, it's Gil's ability to actually sell high-quality B&G and carbon products that attracted me to chase him very proactively to see if he was still keen to come and join us.
What made you take the leap now?
It's about how many breaths I've got left in my body, probably. I realise that's a bit morbid, but ultimately, I suspect we're all in a similar boat. We want to use whatever time, resource, intellect, ability we've got to have the biggest impact over that time. And so looking at Restore, first of all, it had that ecological pedigree and focus that really attracted me. That really is what runs through my core.
I think no one would doubt you are amongst the very, very best of the best, if not the best, in terms of that absolute ecological pedigree and that purity of purpose. So I completely agree.
Purity of purpose underlined, right? That's really, really attractive. But I also want to add value. I also want to, with the time and the energy and the efforts that I deploy, I want that to add value. And so ultimately there's a recipe for this. It's quite a simple recipe. You need restoration ambition. So you need landowners or land managers who want to do something differently. Restore has an inbox full of landowners and managers asking and inquiring about transitioning their landscapes. Great. You need that ecological ability and excellence to deliver that transition, because we get lost in lots of different places, but the reality of all the services we'll end up discussing over the course of this chat, they come down to restoring ecological process. It's an ecological restoration focused activity and mission that we need. There's a tick in that box. And I could see the need to bring a natural capital kind of commercial model that made that whole thing possible, made it viable, and then made it sustainable in the long term, so that all of that restoration is secured over time. So I could see where I could add value, and the sort of supercharging effect of the elements that I bring with the elements that already existed. So very, very exciting to be able to be greater than the sum of our parts.
And it's not just Gil. So talk to us about the size of the team now, and you've brought some incredible talent together.
So we're 10 people going on 15. And Gil's obviously been an incredible hire, but we've also been very lucky with a number of other hires without whom I would be unable to do anything. So our land management director, Ross Wingfield, he was the guy. I could look at a landscape and say what was missing. I could see it needed low intensity grazing. I could see we had to put all these trees back. I could see that river shouldn't be straight and needed to be blocked. If I'm the guy who sees that the dam needs to be built, Ross is the guy who knows how to build, how to work with those rural stakeholders on the land. But, one of the most likeable, team-spirited, practical people I've met in any walk of life, a guy who builds his own house. And basically, Ross's ability to work with farm managers, with gamekeepers, and deliver this change, this really radical ecological change, as if it's just another day of farm management, is quite extraordinary and is quite rare. Ross and I worked together in a previous business. He approached me when I founded the store, and I did advertise the job, and I got 85 applicants, nowhere near the ridiculous numbers you get rich. But I was a lot of people applied for this opportunity.
We didn't get this many when we were first advertising, so that's a heck of a number.
And even then, it was clear that a lot of these people either could work well as land managers but didn't have the vision, or didn't get my vision and the ambition, or they got the ambition, but could you really put them in a field with a gamekeeper, with a farmer, and get a practical wetland, a result at the end of a week? And the answer was no. So Ross has been with us from the beginning. We were joined late last year by an amazing head of ecology, Samuel Durham. Sam's a very rare combination of an entrepreneurial businessman and an ecologist rolled into a single human being. He's got that drive, he's got that constant energy, that proactive client management.
They're still unicorns in the sector, right? Because you can have people who are entrepreneurial, or often you can have people who are environmentally minded. To have that combination is still incredibly rare.
It is. And listen, not everyone in the store needs to be commercially minded. And he wouldn't shoot me for saying this, but our amazing head of species recovery, Peter Cooper, his job and his hobby and his life all just blur into one. Glowworms, swallowtail butterflies, this amazing love of nature. We don't need to be commercial. We have amazing commercial acumen in the building. But when you're talking about ecology, you're talking about delivery, you're talking about drive, you're talking about rapid execution, having an ecologist who's also run and built out a successful business, Lloyd Bohr Ecology, was a really big hire for us. So what we've got now is vision, commerce, natural capital, land management, ecology, and species restoration, all kind of knitted into the same business and underpinned by some really cool elements. So Andrew, our land designer, he's from an engineering background, not a nature background. So he designs and maps these extraordinary landscapes that I was showing to your team earlier on, where people can begin to visualize this scary, vague thing known as nature restoration and picture what their landscape's going to look like. And you can show that to landowners, to farmers, to people who might be very concerned that your moorland is going to be buried in sicker spruce, and all of these things that get mistaken for the vague word that is rewilding. And that's very powerful, I think, having that ability to use these other sector tools, engineering, graphics, filmmaking, all of these things that haven't dwelt in conventional ecology. And the aim of Restore is to put all of that in the same building.
It's a new chapter for the environment sector. So when I first started, it was the most closed-minded, stay away, not invented here, we don't do things differently. Oh, you haven't been volunteering for this trust for 20 years, you're not welcome. Whereas you think about it now, the different tools, techniques, disciplines you're just describing there that you've already brought together. And the sum of those parts give us a diversity of thought, experience, delivery power, lenses on everything that's why we've seen that acceleration of purpose. So, you and I recently sat with a large number of founders in the natural capital sector, and the world has changed a decade in the last couple of years for this sector, because Penny's going to tell me off this, 'cause I keep using this line. A big project in the environmental space was 50 grand. A press release was 50 grand. And we've now got hundreds of millions deployed in this sector. And it wouldn't have happened without those different skill sets that are coming in. So it's super exciting to see the team you're putting together. Gil, one of the questions we get a lot is, but the environment's priceless. It's immoral to put a price tag on it. How do you come back to that challenge from some?
So I do have to navigate that complexity myself. So to me, nature is kind of beyond quantification. It resists quantification. It is beautiful. It is gloriously complex, chaotic, and frankly spiritual. And so applying a value to it, in one sense, is really quite difficult and complex. In another sense, it's utterly simple. Our natural services have values. They're actually reasonably simple to quantify. A broken natural system or natural service has tremendous cost, and those costs are being calculated. Those costs are felt by every person, every business, every government, every country on the planet. And we're in this kind of moment of slow awakening where we're beginning to realize that although nature is kind of, in one sense, beyond quantification and innate, it has a very real, very tangible cost when we don't value it. We destroy it, erode it, don't replace it, don't cherish it. A sort of close to home example might be that in the UK, flooding is our kind of most costly natural hazard. And so that costs the UK on average £2.2 billion a year. So there's a really tangible number for the cost of a broken natural system. So when our catchments and our hydrological systems don't work, combined with climate change, which is also in part the product of faulty natural systems, we as a country suffer £2.2 billion worth of costs each year. That's set to go up by 50% in the next 15 years by some estimations. So we're going to get really fluent in the actual literal cost of broken systems. And that will really help, because sometimes you need to hit people around the face with cost before they really genuinely understand value. The evolution, the maturity of this approach is that we begin actually to understand the value of those systems, not just the cost of them when they're knackered.
Yeah, we've tried not pricing for it. How's that gone?
Yeah, it's gone brilliantly well.
Yeah. When it's ended up in the world we are, like increasingly a failure to put a price on carbon, my view, is the cause of climate change. If you literally were taxed for every ton you put into the environment, we'd all make very, very different decisions. People often say, oh, well, we can't possibly do that because it wouldn't provide a just transition. The absence of that price on carbon is not providing a just transition. The people with the biggest footprints are not bearing the biggest loads. The people in developing parts of the world are going to experience the biggest burdens and the biggest impacts because of what the people who have got plenty are doing already, and that includes all of us. So we all have a moral obligation. My moral problem isn't putting a price on carbon. It's a moral offence to the people who aren't doing anything about climate change. And those are not you guys, because you've got a hell of a big year planned. What does 2025 look like for Restore?
Well, I think it comes in two parts.
Did anyone see that lean forward? That was good. This is going to be a good bit.
So the first part is actually, how do we put this? It is killing off our own consultancy. So consultancy was an amazing way to lock down trust and acres, but you also need, for these long-term projects, stability and capital. So we're going to be moving increasingly towards natural capital financing our projects. We are moving away from that completely self-limiting business model where you have to keep going back to the landowner saying, can you please pay us some more money for this nature restoration? And yes, we're expensive because we like to think we're good at what we do.
Reassuringly expensive.
Reassuringly expensive, not a rip-off, we hope. But, we are talking projects, Town Say, for example. These are 10, 20 years of interventions followed by, hopefully, a much longer natural capital tail off the end. And in order to have that stability, you can't run, and we shouldn't be running Restore as a consultancy. We like to think our purpose is too good to be a consultancy. So we need the same stability that you have owning the asset, but without owning the asset. And I think that sort of brings us to our new service model, doesn't it, quite nicely?
Mm-hmm. To contribute to that, so being part of the extended team of a project or estate or farm or landscape. Really important. So clearly we've got to understand, contribute to, and facilitate the vision of that landowner or land manager. We've got to add to it. We've got to bring our particular ecological excellence. Then we've got to deliver it over time. And being an embedded part of that extended team for a prolonged period of time, like Ben says, 10 or 20 years, allows us to assure the quality of that delivery. It allows us to not have and live out the knee-jerk kind of conclusions that you inevitably draw when you first see a landscape or an opportunity. You really don't understand the place, the people, the opportunity fully until you've lived it and felt it.
Whenever we buy somewhere, we often host a community event and say, come and talk to us. Without doubt, we get, what are you going to change? What are you going to do? And we've no idea. We've literally just bought it. It'd be completely reckless to do that. We need to learn and understand. Oh no, we came to be told what you're going to do. We'd like to know what you think. Well, we don't know. Okay. And then we have the flip debate in the other way. So no one's ever happy with the pace. They don't recognize that you need to spend time understanding a landscape. As a minimum, you need every season once. Ideally, you want it plenty of times to understand how things change and adjust, because how do you know if that's a common season? Have you had a really cold winter or a super hot summer or a dry one or a wet one? And even then, what does the future iterations of those look like? So I think people underestimate the need for patience in our space, and the fact that the environment doesn't give a damn about the financial year or grant cycles or things like that. It thinks in decades and centuries, not minutes.
We 100% agree. And I think so it would be a bit of an act of arrogance to presume that you could answer all the questions with 1 or 2 or 3 visits or a single report or a single act of consultancy.
Yeah.
It's a desire from our part to understand the place and the stakeholders and the community potential and the ecological potential that seeks us looking to kind of anchor ourselves as a project deliverer over time. And so that's led to there's a long-winded way of getting there, Ben, to our kind of refined service provision. So in a sense, we want to be very focused about what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. And so we've redefined our service provision so that we can go through a very set process of absorbing or visioning a landscape, visioning the ecological potential, the societal potential, the natural capital potential in a sort of watercolor of opportunity. Then going through some really structured systems and processes to deliver that landscape, to embed, restoration management system that ensures that it's going to happen over time, it's going to happen well. And then creating some natural capital opportunities, which are more than sympathetic to that vision. They are the product of that bespoke vision. They are not a set of pre-existing products that you are just trying to crowbar
the
into
outcome
something.
of the restoration, not the purpose of it.
Precisely, and they need to be bespoke in their own construct to that vision. So what we do never changes. How we shape the natural capital as a result of that can change, can take a load of different forms. We can shape the clay in lots of different ways to suit what the market might want at that particular time. That takes time, and by being kind of embedded within a project, it allows us to be really quite entrepreneurial and have this kind of mixture, a braided approach to natural capital. So we're not a carbon business.
Lovely river reference. On the braiding.
We must talk about what sort of wetland you are.
Thank you for that one, by the way.
And so having a diversified, braided approach to natural capital where you have 3, 4, 5, 6 different routes to market with 6 different natural capital products or services, for example, gives you resilience against those things that you just don't know until you know them or you're just not in control of. Sudden shifts in government policy. I'm only raising my eyebrows because that's particularly relevant as we are. We've just heard.
Recording this early March 25.
Yeah, in early March, mid-March 25, we got the news of fundamental changes to SFI, at least for a couple of years, but as a forebearer, I think more significant changes.
Just on the way past, all governments and the agricultural sector are just in the most unsustainable, abusive relationship ever. It's just, and the agricultural fraternity, however you want to draw the line around that, keeps going to the government. Are you going to help us, right? You're going to come and help? And they just keep going, no, and hitting them. And then they just keep going, oh, but it'll be fine. You'll help us now, won't you? No, we've told you, we're just going to hit you every time. We're not coming to help. I don't know why they don't get that the government are not there to help them.
It's very interesting. So your average walk around a field with a client who normally already wants to do nature restoration by the time
because you've been invited in.
Exactly. And they always start with, oh, well, we like these natural capital ideas, but look, we've got these fields, these 400 acres, we just put them into SFI. And the first thing I say is, look, the macro advice here is take it out. The same thing we did at South Hill. 40 kilometres of hedgerows in what was then CS, countryside stewardship, take it out. 2 reasons. Governments at the moment change their mind about farming policy once a year, and we are going for 30-year transformations that want to be there for the next 500 years. So that just is never going to square that circle. Secondly, the vast majority of the ecologically speaking, government-led schemes are what somebody who studied the countryside in the 70s, when it was already ecologically buggered, decided is what nature wants. It's not what nature needs, it's not what nature likes, it's not what a tree sparrow or a grey partridge actually likes. So when I started walking around South Hill, Paul, our amazing gamekeeper on that estate, kept saying, well, look, countryside stewardship tells me to manage this hedgerow for grey partridges, but I'm a gamekeeper. If there's one thing I know, it's how to manage a hedgerow for grey partridges. And what they're paying me for doesn't match up to the ever-declining number of farmland birds on this estate. So ecologically, I have no real interest in government payments. But with my farm finance head on, I think it is dangerous for farmers to think, as you say, the government is coming to the rescue. A year and a half ago, we could monetize complex wood pasture creation for over £500 per acre per year. Then we had SFI, which was a watering down of many of the principles realms, which for us obviously isn't good news. And now we appear to have a period of no SFI at all. So the whole concept of basing farm stability or nature restoration or financial stability on government payments is self-evidently over. So that's where we need to come in even faster and more proactively after the SFI news with a really comprehensive estate-wide natural capital plan, which is what we're coming up with. We have no interest in government payments. People always say, what's your approach to grants? I said, if we're chasing grants, we failed. If we are chasing grants, our natural capital products and the confidence we give our clients is not there. But quite often we will actively urge a landowner to take themselves out of a large area of government payments, even if those are quite attractive and appear quite secure, because we know in 3 years' time, or it seems last week, they'll disappear.
Completely agree. It'd be a miss on the way past if I didn't thank Paul for, despite never meeting him, the amount of public support he gives OC. Whenever there's an angry gamekeeper yelling at me about something, he always pops up and defends me without me being there. So he's very kind. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So let's return back to 25. How do we take this new service offering and model and make that a reality?
This probably brings us to the news. So we can get so far by promising a landowner, truthfully promising a landowner, that within about 18 months, Gil's natural capital products can be taken to market and begin to deliver. Problem is, in 18 months is still a reasonably long time. We're extremely impatient and we love cracking on with nature restoration. Funnily enough, nature restoration in this country done well is not a passive process. It's an active process of reversing everything from the over-nutrification of land to tree establishment and all of these other things that you're doing on all your estates. But it's capital intensive. So we've known for some time that the only real way to scale without buying, which is our model, is that there has to be an element of front finance. And that element of front finance has to be pretty compelling. And it has to do 2 things. It has to deal with transforming from extractive land use to extensive restoration. And it has to tie the landowner over in a very convincing, simple way until the natural capital products come online. And so for some time, Gil and I have realised that we needed a partner in this journey to help us transition landscapes and get that front financing element, restore finance, where we can arrive and say, look, we're not bribing you with money. We're here because you believe we're the best at what we do. But we're all going to get on better, move faster, have more security and proceed to the goal that we want in nature restoration if we come with capital at the start of our journey. And that's been a very exciting breakthrough the last few months.
Yeah, before we talk about the breakthrough, the process is really important. So you don't change people's minds with financial parity. So if you can't offer something which is financially more interesting and exciting than what they're currently doing, then it's very difficult to engineer change. It's very difficult to change full stop. Even if you want to, change is tough. So offering someone like for like, it's not going to work, not in the sort of scale and pace that we're after. And if you are short on the capital for interventions, then those interventions, that intent, that ambition gets watered down. And we are not in the business of watered down intent and ambition. We have got very pronounced, very clear ecological ambition to do the best we can as quick as we can. So the money really matters. And increasingly, there is an awareness of the ROI of nature, which has allowed us to create a partnership which allows us to solve the question of money.
And we will be launching towards the end of this year Restore Finance. And Restore Finance will simply allow our biggest, best projects the capital at the start of this journey to make that journey complete and unlock the natural capital that ultimately pays all parties back and makes this commercially viable.
Congratulations. Can we get a round of applause in the room, please, people? Amazing. So in terms of how that process will work moving forward, as a landowner, what will you experience when that's presented to you? How will that look from a financial package and perspective?
The very first part of the journey is exactly as it has been before. All of our clients come to us. We have no cold approach strategy. We turn up at the big events like Groundswell and Blue Earth, but really we have people coming to us. They come through the books or they come through word of mouth.
What I love about that is, you and I talked about this last night. So Peter Graham, the amazing author of the book How to Win the Premier League, who's a data science expert, in the book it says, well, how do you persuade people who are not interested in data to use it? He said, you don't. If they're not interested, don't try and turn the ship around.
Yep.
The people who are interested, have a brilliant conversation with them. You can't waste your time and effort on people who don't want to understand your language or what you're talking about. So you're absolutely right. You've got the best self-selection method there. It's why with our recruitment, we really lean into, this is a really tough job. You do not want it, because it avoids a load of applications that don't want the job anyway.
It would be easy to misread your job adverts, but I can see why you do it. And it's the same reason when we had a farm cluster facilitator on a call the other day, and they said, oh, you're going to have to really come along and persuade all these farmers. I said, no, that's not what we do. We're not a campaign organisation. We bluntly do not have the time. We have the opportunities already. We don't have time to be a talking shop. Nope. We don't need to. We have the opportunity. So we'll go to the estates. It might be myself, it might be Gil. Often it'll be me in the first instance. We just walk around and we set the vision. Where is the land? The land has inevitably gone on a pretty hard journey over the last 100 years. As I said to you last time, we take fault out of it. A lot of the things that happen to land happened before our clients even inherited the land or bought the land or started farming the land. So we spell out pretty clearly what's happened to that land and therefore where that land needs to go. And we raise that level of ambition to the roof. We really push them to challenge in a positive way why they've been doing what they've been doing. And it inevitably comes down to, well, government paid us to do this. Our neighbours do it. We've always done it this way. And then they pause and go, well, actually, no, we haven't always done it this way. I remember when 40 years ago, we weren't using
always
glyphosate.
Follows that pattern. Absolutely.
So this journey takes the best part of a day. I never spend less than a full day on a farm. Sometimes if it's a big estate, you'll stay overnight, you'll spend a few days. And they ultimately have to know that we can read the existing landscape and the species within it, and that's where the naturalist skills come in, because most people who go out to their landscape can't really separate the grasshopper warblers from the sedge warblers and everything else. So they want to know that do we actually know what we're talking about on the nature front? If that box is ticked, then they want to know what the financial outcomes are. And by that stage, they're already sold on the nature journey. But often it's, well, it sounds nice, but isn't it impractical? And, what am I going to do about the SFI I'm stuck in? And does nature really make money? Some of them are quite far down the route. They might have tried a Section 106 B&G. They've got as far as dealing with an LPA, and they've gone, oh, God, this natural capital thing is more difficult than it looks. We encounter lots of people who are queuing B&G, but not selling B&G. There's a very important difference, queuing natural capital to selling natural capital. This is then where we introduce Gil, and we then commercialise that offering. We say, the more ambitious you are, the more nature you unlock, the more we're interested and the more capital we will unlock for you. Because I don't want people being caught in the middle, modifying hedgerows, taking 50 acres. So we're getting increasingly bold. We're saying, look, if you've got this 500-acre block, we're interested, and the capital will be more than anything you've seen in the last 30 years. But if you want to test us on 40 acres, that's not for us.
So your sweet spot you're looking at is around 500 acres?
Upwards.
Okay, just written a piece on the importance of scale. It says everything you described there. It's also efficiency of management and of deployment and of cost and of reach and of the team you need to look at it. And with scale becomes repetitions and things that you can do to learn and improve your process and everything like that. So the sector's never had scale before. No. It's always been partitioned and small and iterative. And in fact, it's never had scale in terms of space or time. It's always been 12-month projects on a small scale. And hasn't the environment sector loved a pilot project forever? Because you can't blame anyone with a pilot. It's just a pilot. It's just a pilot. Nothing's permanent. It's just we don't need pilot projects anymore.
Can't do pilots in the natural world. Let me give you an example. So the Great Crane Project, amazing partnership with the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust and the RSPB. I love the WWT. They are a charity, but my God, does every person in that organisation punch above its weight.
Yeah.
So that when they started releasing cranes, they went, do you know what? Should we just keep going and keep going and keep going? And they released enough cranes that they've not only repopulated Somerset and Gloucestershire, but Oxfordshire and Wales. That's how you do it. You dip your toe in the water with nature. From an ecological point of view, it doesn't work. And from a commercial point of view, it also doesn't work. If we get caught with just 40, 50 acres, yes, we can do our bite-sized B&G package, but it is nowhere near as commercially rewarding as getting someone who owns 4,000 to 5,000 acres, of whom there are many in the UK, to give us 500 acres. And, then they're diversifying their own estate. I will say at the start, you don't need to rewild, and maybe shouldn't rewild, a 5,000 acre estate. Let's start with 500 acres, ideally maybe 1,000 acres. Ideally,
for avoidance of doubt, you're not going to turn down a 5,000 acre approach.
We are certainly not. Okay. And we certainly don't.
Yeah.
But we have to be pragmatic enough to dovetail into very large estates where there may be AHA tenancies. There may be legitimate food production needs. There may be really good use of land. So there may be silvopasture, there may be orchards, things that shouldn't be rewilded, systems that are already working. Yeah. But there will always be on that landscape a big failed area, economically failed, ecologically failed, where the landowners really... We always start with a map at the farm table and a coffee. And I say, look, draw a line around the bit that you least like on your own land.
I love asking them, where's your favourite bit? And actually, it's one of those, when someone says, I'm not really bothered, that estate's for sale. Because often we get invited to go see something and you don't know straight away whether someone actually wants to sell something or they just want to have a chat with me about it. Because that occasionally happens. They just want to show off their estate. And if they're listing all the places they love, you're like, I've just come to see a lovely estate, haven't I? Whereas if they're like, not really doing it for me anymore. Oh, okay, cool. You do want to sell this thing then.
I want to come back to the danger of getting stuck in the middle and ambition and what that actually does to the integrity of the project. So not getting stuck in the middle, pushing at that ambition, both ecologically, but also in the other things we can ask that landscape to do in terms of storytelling and inspiration as a catalyst for inspiring other people to do similar, or a catalyst for buy-in to that project through the stakeholders locally and nationally. And in terms of access and community and nature connection and education. So how far can we push the ambition, both ecologically and societally, and in terms of the story? Or if we can push each of those things as far as we can, it makes what ultimately ends up being our product much, much more saleable. It allows us to be much more confident, much more secure about finding a market for it, and being confident and secure about finding a good, strong market price for it.
People don't cross the road for vanilla ice cream.
No. Most of the time, people aren't buying your carbon. They're not buying your unit, whatever that unit is. They are trying to get at the values your project represents through that unit. And so if you're in the business of selling units, then you're going to end up selling the cheapest possible units to the least discerning possible buyers. If you're in the business of selling...
It's a race to the bottom for the industry and will lead to terrible things.
Yeah, and you can see it playing out in various places. Yeah. If you're in the business of selling change and hope and transition and ambition and people and place and nature, That's what people want to buy. You're in a race to the top, and that's the space that we wish to operate in.
Beautiful.
This is the thing when people always say to me, well, how do you explain the carbon market? I say, it's not my responsibility. All we're doing is carving out the premium niche. You know, we're not selling Skodas, we're selling Rolls Royces. You know, when we come to sell Tallansea and its ecological potential in carbon, we're not going to be doing it via spreadsheets. We want them to be up there seeing the white-tailed eagles that recolonised after the deer were removed, which of course unlock the ability for the island to regenerate. And if they don't find that really, really exciting and motivating, they are not the right buyer for the project.
Isn't it depressing we can't use Tesla as the example of the... Because it is the one, because they made the electric vehicle exciting and sexy and exclusive and made people want it. And now Elon's gone mad because absolute money and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But that's the example. It's not Vauxhalls, it's Teslas. That's the change, because it's not just a little adjustment, it's a complete pivot away from an extractive to a restorative future.
You've got to go the whole way in one. And then look, we have so many landowners that we nicely turn down because they don't want that.
It's so important for you guys to turn them down, because I think for people out there listening and understanding how hard it is to deliver landscape change when you own the place. That's super difficult because everyone's got an opinion. You also have that extra layer of having to be respectful and courteous with potentially multiple generations of ownership if you're spanning your 30 years. So to be that partner requires even more emotional intelligence and delicacy and care and compassion. So you absolutely have to find the people that are embedded on that mission. Otherwise it's a nightmare. So yeah, you've got to be so selective.
They exist though. So it's really refreshing and inspiring how often you're sitting in front of someone who really gets it, really ambitious, really dynamic.
And do you often meet with multiple generations of the family?
We do, and I'll just give you two examples of where it's worked and where it really didn't last year, and I won't mention the place in question. But so where it's worked, we've got an amazing project in Lincolnshire. The younger generation, 27-year-old biology teacher, not remotely wedded to anything except nature and creating food directly out of nature. So orchards, the perfect balance. So obviously read the books, got us down there. We said, actually, for once, we are...
Did they find you from your books?
This client did, but they knew that I was now doing this for a living.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is going to work. So we waived the fee that we normally charge, which we have never done. And it has worked. And it's worked because...
Why did you do it in this case?
I could just see that this guy had the same level of speed and pace and ambition as us, completely unencumbered by any traditional self-limiting land management beliefs. His mother, who remains very much involved in the running of the farm, has a pottery where people come down, including people with learning disabilities, and it's an amazing, safe, energizing space for them. So if we went through it in the tick boxes, ecological ambition, social conscience, educational value, and a complete contempt for messing around in the middle.
You fell in love, didn't you?
They were either going to pivot the whole lot or not at all. But it is important that both generations were on side, and the older generation was desperate for the younger generation to succeed, knowing they would carry that on. That defines for us the perfect client. But of course...
absolutely lit up telling that story.
And these are the ones...
And that's your stories. That's your exact story point about amplification and reach and special. And it's a feel, isn't it? When you meet a client or a partner or somebody like that, we talk about it a lot in recruitment. And we have Ellie, a wonderful intern, sat behind the camera over there. Everybody who met her at the interview process got that hell yes feeling, to the point where they were like, we have to offer her a role. When you get that feeling, back yourself with it, whether it's a client, a partner, an opportunity, you've just got to action upon it.
When you know, you know. I always end up using the same old analogy of when you're fishing, you've had a long, long day of watching a float or watching your line or feeling the line, wondering whether that was a bite or not. Was that a bite? Was that? And then when you actually get a bite, you're not wondering at all. You just know.
So the only slight challenge with that is you can't coach it. It has to be learned through experience. So we include a wide array of the team in all our interview processes, so people understand our culture and the culture welcomes a person in. So you'd have to try and sell someone on a role, or sell the team on the person because they've met them all. But if you say to someone who's never interviewed before, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no, until you've experienced that feeling you had with that client, you don't know it. So you have to, one of our amazing management accountants, Emily, she'd been doing a lot of recruitment with us and had a really good eye for talent and judgment on things, but I've never had that feeling. And we've just appointed a new investment director, and Emily helped her get from the station to the interview. And she came in, grabbed me and went, "It's a hell yes from me." And she's like, it just changed her approach to interviewing because now she understands where that bar is. So that's super special. I loved hearing you describe that.
But we've got to be honest about the mistakes, right? So I think when I started Restore and it was just me, no salary, that's a pretty terrifying place. So, you know, I use my skills of persuasion to sign up a lot of estates, probably too many actually. And we had one last year where that intergenerational conflict escalated enormously, and won't go into any geographical or personal details, but fundamentally the older generation had handed that project to a very enterprising female pioneer for that project, who we formed an amazing can-do relationship with. We had Ross down there on the ground, really preparing the way for an epic project. And the older generation, at the last minute, saw the ragwort and the scruffiness. And there is this phase when you're transitioning arable where it does just look a bit naff. You don't just go from lovely, beautiful, clean fields to redback shrikes and complex grassland. And this is where the patience and the understanding comes in, and why we can't function as a consultancy, because sometimes you need that stability to deal with the patients and deal with the teething issues. But ultimately, the decision was made at the older generational level, let's go back to intensive farming. And that's not what we do. And there's nothing you can do with that model, with that consultancy model. So many lessons were learned. So we screen very carefully. So when you're talking about managing all these multiple stakeholders, if there's too much conflict at the start, if I'm in a room where I can see that 6 or 7 people all have their own version of the estate, we thank them for their time and turn it down, because there needs to be not a kind of Orwellian conformity, but there needs to be enough people on the same page to do what Gil's done at Belmont and deliver fast, meaningful change, because we're all only here once. I don't want to be sitting at farm tables and estate tables debating and mediating. That isn't what Restore does.
There's the opportunity cost of that. You could be sitting at another farm table with an inspirational team ready to go.
Yeah. That's probably a bit of advice I think we'd all give aspiring founders out there. Be very selective. A no's really cheap. A yes is time consuming and expensive. Yeah. So we have now visited more than 100 estates to buy 11. And that's not the ones that we've considered or analysed or looked at. That's physically been to see as we were calibrating models and deciding on things. And I go with a presumptive no. We go and view it. We know it might work economically. It looks like a good opportunity, but I go to find the no's. Actually, that's some inner Charlie Munger that I didn't know I was channeling there, because you want the answer to be yes. If you go looking for a yes, you'll easily fall in love. So go to find the reason not to acquire an estate or not to work with a client. Do it positively with enthusiasm, but actively go to spot the problems, because you want them before you're into a long-term relationship with it.
So one of the things we're keen to do at Restore is to apply that driven, fast, private sector, quickest route to market approach to species reintroductions. And by that, I don't mean skipping the science and just releasing a load of things like the lynx and the Cairngorm, with skipping all the steps and legalities and the ethics on the way. What I mean is turning it into a replicable, cyclable, scalable business model.
Can you help people understand why that was bad? So the people out there, oh, you just need to do something, you just need to get on with it. Because people celebrate the beaver bombers, the people that help beavers come back. But the lynx is different, right?
But also, if you look at the real breakthroughs in beavers that have led to this amazing news that we can now release beavers into England without them being in enclosures, we'll be doing that on some of our estates. There is an element of illegality that speeded things up, but it's actually driven pioneers, people like James Wallace at the Beaver Trust, who really pushed this forwards with people skills, with advocacy and with speed. And you look at the Beaver Trust, everything they've done has been completely above board. So I don't actually buy this idea that beavers are, maybe the first beavers were here due to illegal activity, but it's actually been really good, focused, fast advocacy. When James set up the Beaver Trust, it was this focused, single-purpose organisation with loader-driven individuals, targeted lobbying, and they've played a huge role in getting the result.
Yeah, he is a superstar.
And also, beavers is all about demonstration. Every time you put beavers into a landscape, you can take anyone there, farmer, politician, and you can show them within a year the landscape is completely transformed. When it comes to lynx, why was the cairngorms one bad? I mean, where to begin? So, animal welfare. These animals would never have survived in the wild. These were just tame zoological moggies. These were not animals that were ready for release. It was done illegally. It never helps. It was done on the doorstep of a really credible conservationist, Anders Poulsen and the Wildland Company, who would not have had anything to do with that whatsoever. So it discredits many credible people in the sector who've worked incredibly hard. And in the background, you had Scotland, the big picture, Peter Cairns, a great advocate for just engaging everyone around lynx, trying to get to the bottom of why can't we have this animal back? You know, this is a entirely harmless, woodland, secretive, deer-culling animal that will have immense impacts upon ecological restoration, natural regeneration, natural capital. And it sets everything back by 10 years when you do something like that. It's an entirely ego-driven move. It has nothing to do, in my view, with actual conservation or restoration. We shouldn't be talking about these things so much we don't act, but we have to talk about them. We have to do them legally, because how else do those animals have protection? If you look at the beavers on the Tay, do we really want beavers getting shotguns put in their faces? You know, there are costs of when something is done illegally. So, you know, what we're very interested in doing at Restore is not starting with the lynx, but starting with swallowtail butterflies, starting with large coppers, starting with the horned dung beetle, this tiny little triceratops that lives or used to live in dung before ivermectins were invented, and putting these back into our sites and building the food chain from the bottom up. But we absolutely need to be scaling species restoration on a massive scale. As I said in Rebirding, we need to have now reservoirs of turtle doves, of cuckoos, of willow tits, of lesser spotted woodpeckers, all in well-managed aviaries, so that when we don't save them the first time round, we're not sat there lamenting for the next 50 years going, oh, what a shame, don't you remember the sound of the red-backed shrike? Don't you remember where turtle doves used to be purring in every hedgerow? Why don't we create these reservoirs of species ready to put back? So what we're trying to do is to take that fast private sector approach that we brought to Restore and apply it to this very slow, talk-heavy, action-light, legal species reintroduction movement. So we're going to be convening this year the Pelican Panel, and we brought the RSPB, we brought Natural England. We're going to bring the people who could object, like the Angling Trust. We're going to put them all on a panel, but the aim of that panel is not talk. The aim of that panel is action. And if it's decided that Britain's wetlands are big enough for restoring Dalmatian pelicans, then the next plan is to crack on and do it.
Just incredible, absolutely incredible. What can landowners do to help in that process?
Get their landscape ready with the likes of us. And what can you do? Get your landscapes ready. Many of them are already. I'll be talking to you about wrynecks at Dorback, amazing anthill raiding bird that would do very well in the birch pastures of the cairngorms, and just a lovely, harmless, wonderful addition to an estate like Dorback. So really, the role of the landowner is not to do the species reintroduction. The role of the landowner is to work with the likes of Restore to get their landscape ready. So when we restore the Macaire grasslands around the edge of Tarrantay, we are preparing the way for corncrakes potentially to be reintroduced. When we're working with fenland landowners, we're not a single species organisation, we're a holistic land management organisation, but we're still keeping an eye on where the milk parsley could be for the swallowtails. So it's about building that sort of 5 years of readiness ahead of a species reintroduction, not just cutting all the corners like the lynx, putting back a load of unready animals and just hoping for the best. Because yes, beavers worked, but most of them haven't. People have been butterfly bombing Britain for 20 years, but those butterflies haven't re-established because they skipped science and engagement and landscape scale and landscape quality and chucked a load of butterflies out of a cardboard box in the hope that it would work. That's not rewilding, that's just incompetence. So what we want to do is to speed up species restoration, but not take out the science. And that's where Peter comes in. You know, Pete is a science-driven guy. He's obsessed with the detail, and that's really important.
So we've come. So OC's 4 years old in June, and the environmental sector. I said the environmental sector. Well, the natural capital sector now that wasn't a thing 4 years ago. Gil, where's your hope for the next 4? So if we project forward for your work and others in the sector, what do you hope and what do you think we'll see change in that period?
I'm tremendously hopeful. I'm always pretty optimistic, to be honest. I have an optimistic outset, but actually, there's cause for tremendous hope and tremendous optimism. So if you look at the really big picture, we live in an age of a moment of transition where there's a slow but real realization that every business, every government is utterly dependent on nature, whether that's for their supply chain, raw materials, for their human resources, for the provision of a stable environment or climate within which to operate, or their reputation. They're utterly dependent on nature. And so it moves nature from a kind of ethical consideration into a commercial or maybe even a survival imperative. And the result of that is that we are seeing, and we're only seeing the beginning of a huge transition of institutional capital into nature. Massive, and it's only the first trickle. And
so just on that institutional point, so I was very privileged to be at an event at Mansion House in London last week with NatWest Cushion and just an inspirational man, Julius Pasale, who we will get on the podcast at some point. And you go back a couple of years when pension funds started to talk about potentially working with natural capital. What we'd often hear is we'd love to do it, but we just can't. Fiduciary responsibility means we can't. There was the belief that the rules that govern pension fund trustees said you must invest only in things that maximizes financial return and it gives you certainty of return. So even the people that said, no, we really want to be part of impact investment, whether that was environmental or social, but impact focused investment. So Julius went away with his colleagues at Cushion and they appointed Eversheds, the law firm, to produce a legal opinion to say, can you, if you want to, can you factor in other factors than just the financial return? And what was wonderful, so this event was to release this legal opinion with the leading KCs that work on pension and finance laws. And it said, not only can you, but you must factor in the future of the world your pension fund members will retire into. So that means for the first time, you could draw a distinct line between investment that could go into healthcare and better housing and potentially even natural capital. So that one event is a pivotal moment that, it's as big a moment as, I always remember that photo in the back of the first Wilding book with everyone at Charlie's Place talking about what Wilding would become and how you fast forward, and that was such a pivotal moment. I honestly think that adjustment, that legal opinion to give the people that want to invest the £3 trillion available in the pension fund sector, just 1%, 2%, 3% of it would be absolutely transformative for the environment sector. And we had a movement last week that makes that just a little bit easier.
100% agree with that. It changes it from even these early stage conversations. An investment into natural capital from let's say the pension sector remains this kind of uncorrelated outlier.
Yeah.
And the more it can become part of that mainstream investment strategy, the more money we'll see transition. And when we're talking money, we're talking, numbers that in the conservation sector you don't usually exchange. Like you said earlier, you're exchanging tens of thousands in your conversation, your ambition, your appetite, not tens of millions or tens of billions of pounds or more. And so the result there is that those organizations that can't demonstrate nature positivity at their core are going to find it very difficult to access capital. But those organizations that can demonstrate and communicate really powerful nature positivity are going to have a competitive advantage over their other business competitors. And we're going to see that in that space is what kindles the demand for our natural capital. So those businesses and organizations have to act in a way that allows them to draw down that capital. And acting in that way is the demand for our natural capital and the natural capital outputs from our projects and our restoration. And that movement is happening now. And consumer and investor demand will drive this into the mainstream. There's this kind of process which things go through, and it happens in a blink of an eye, even though at the outset you think this is going to take bloody ages, where things move from being so unlikely as a concept they seem almost farcical to being inevitable, to being mainstream. And it's happening, and it'll happen really quite quickly. So I'm unbelievably hopeful that the level of ambition that we've got in this room can be financed, can be delivered, and can be the first few steps on monumental transition, which we bloody well need.
Gentlemen, this has been an absolute treat. Our time is coming to an end. I've got a question left for each of you. We'll go with Gil first and finish with Ben. What's the one question I haven't asked you wish I had?
Shit.
That's staying in the edit.
Thank you. I've done so well not to swear so far. I've let myself down now. So the one question you haven't asked me that I wish you had might be about natural capital and how we can make that a reality, how you find the buyer, because so often in the conversations, the process, the product, the investment, they're there in the conversation. The buyer is missing. And so had you asked me that question, I would have spent a bit of time explaining that the vast majority of versions of natural capital that I see out there are missing the hustle and the entrepreneurial kind of spirit and grind and intensity required to drive people to buy your product. Nobody knocks on your door and says, let me give you £250,000, £500,000, £1 million for your product. It might change over time, but most of the time you have to tenaciously unpack that opportunity, demonstrate the value, demonstrate the cascading benefits, make it happen. And without that, it doesn't happen. And what you end up with is a kind of circular conversation about opportunity, but no money changing hands.
We're seeing that divide now. We're seeing those companies, the people sat in this room and that we're here in the last few days, that are prepared to do everything it takes to make their businesses in this sector a success. And we're seeing the ones that aren't. And sadly for them, we're seeing them drop away. Google was the 21st search engine. Neither of our companies are the first natural capital companies. Some have come and gone already, and others will drop by the wayside because my favorite quote, you don't have to do the work, somebody else will. And no one's going to outwork us. So it stands us in good stead. Ben, same to you. What do you wish I'd asked you?
I wish you'd asked me. When I look at the oil sector, I'm envious because I look at the impact they have on government for the worse and bending government to destructive outcome. And you and Archie Nattergal were teasing me last night when you thought I'd said, let's set up a union.
That's because Kane lied.
That's because Kane lied, yes. That's what happens. He'd had a few beers by then. Joking aside, the question which you had asked is, as we grow, you've scaled your business, we're scaling ours, Nattergal doing amazing things, Credit Nature, Carno Earth, all of these amazing players that didn't exist 5 years ago. The power that we have, and I mean that in the most kind of beneficial sense of the word, to really shape government and public thinking in the way the NFU have misshapen government thinking around farming and food security is very powerful. And I just think we need to ask ourselves the question, as we all grow, we are going to become a very powerful sector. And I do think we need to become a single lobbying voice for nature recovery, because we have the commercial arguments, the social arguments, the educational arguments, and the environmental arguments for the first time all built into our businesses. So that is where we can collaborate. Some friendly competition, brilliant, but collaboration to become as powerful in nature as oil is in oil, I think is something we should continue to think about.
Let's keep talking about that exact topic. Gentlemen, thank you. Hugely appreciate you visiting the shoot room. Second appearances, but first time in the actual room. So congratulations on an incredible journey so far, and what a partnership for 2025, and hopefully we'll align this with the release of when stories out there and we can help you celebrate even more. Congratulations and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.